everyone, we're going to get started. If everybody who wants a seat can grab a seat. We've got plenty of seats up front here. If anybody wants to come sit down, please do. I'll give people a minute to grab a seat. All right, we'll get started as usual with the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you everyone for being here and for being flexible. I'm glad we did move locations because this number of bodies would not have fit in our normal room. We are going to start tonight as usual by reviewing and signing payroll and accounts payable. For the period ending 2/22/25, we had payroll in the amount of $34,034.96. We had accounts payable in the amount of $44,246.95, and we had a standard payment to New Hampshire Retirement of $53,815.63. Oh, and there's Mr. Kleinman, fresh from Logan Airport. And I think John is going to join us remotely, so we'll wait and see when he pops up. I'll give you a minute to sign the manifest. We have it. While we're passing the accounts payable around, I will take a motion to allow John Morgan to participate remotely. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Press aye. Thank you. So John will be remote. Paul, if you can just pass that down after you sign, so that Letty can sign. Great. Next, I'll take a motion to review and approve the consent agenda. One addition to our printed agenda is that there are 3 reports of wood or timber cut that are also in our standard consent agenda, as well as our public minutes from 2/18, our non-public minutes from 2/18, which are sealed, our building permits, and the rec manifest. Is there a motion?
Second.
Any questions, concerns, or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, actually, we have to roll call vote because we have a remote member. Andy? Okay, John's abstaining. Paul?
Aye.
Letty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we'll pass the consent agenda. All right. Now we are going to move on to a very fun part of our meeting. Whenever we have new town employees or officers to swear in, it's always one of our favorite moments. Tonight we are going to be swearing in our new police chief. And looks like we've got quite a group of men and women in blue here to celebrate along with us. So Justin Doty, if you can come up to the front. All right. So first, we need to have a motion and a second to sign our appointment slip. If we could do that, please.
Second.
I'll take the slip, please. We have a motion and a second to promote Justin Doty to Brentwood Chief of Police. We'll take a roll call vote. Andy?
Aye.
Letty?
Aye.
John? Aye. Paul?
A hearty aye.
A hearty aye. And I'm an enthusiastic aye. We will all sign here before the swearing in. Here you go, Paul. You can give us a sign there. So we are thrilled that Justin Doty is going to become our new chief. He has been with us for about 3 years and has been our lieutenant and our officer in charge since last fall. Justin has done an amazing job. We hear both from the community and also from his officers how much they value him and how much they were hoping that we would pick him as chief, and I think that goes a long way to us making this decision. We're super thrilled that Justin's agreed to be our chief and really value his integrity, his honesty, his guidance to us as the select board about the things that we need to do to keep the town safe and to keep all our town residents safe. And we are so thrilled that he has agreed to be our next chief. And we now are going to have Daphne swear him in. She's in favor.
I want to stand on this side since all your people.
There you go.
Ready? Raise your right hand, please. I, Justin Doty,
I, Justin Doty,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
discharge and perform
all the duties incumbent on me
all the duties incumbent on me
as Brentwood Chief of Police,
as Brentwood Chief of Police,
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities,
agreeably to the rules and regulations
agreeably to the rules and regulations
of the Constitution and laws
of the Constitution and laws
of the state of New Hampshire,
of the state of New Hampshire,
so help me God.
so help me God.
All right, we got to take some photos here. Yeah, let's go by five.
Picture.
All right. You guys want to like stand here by the flag maybe? Thank you.
Say cheese. You smile. Look over here. Ooh, big flag.
Here we go. Cheese. Awesome. All right. You want all your friends come over?
Come on, friends.
Yeah, might as well.
All right.
Friends and family.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's get everybody like back behind.
Still in the front row in shorts.
Okay, perks.
Yeah.
All right, everybody crowd in here. Oh yeah, get Katie up there. All right. Smile. Nice, guys. All right. All right, we want everybody else?
I need one more.
Any
Yeah.
other officers? Come on over.
Nikki, you too. You're not getting out of this one. How about Chief Bird?
Chief, come on. You're wearing blue. Hop in.
2 shades of
Right. All right, hop in. Nikki, move a little.
Come on, Nick. She's
She's hiding. She's hiding. All right, 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Now family. Family.
All right.
We've been looking for that. Stop six, maybe? I forget.
I think they make each other mad. I think the microphones don't like each other. Testing, okay, this one works. So this is an extra special fun night because after that great celebration of swearing in our new chief, we now have another celebration, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to Daphne, who's going to talk about the dedication of our town report.
So this year's annual town report is dedicated to Wayne and Kathy St. Hilaire, whose unwavering commitment and tireless efforts have profoundly shaped the community of Brentwood, New Hampshire. Kathy and Wayne, can you stand up? So I'm just going to read about 12 pages here, okay? Kathy moved to Brentwood in 1973 and purchased their home on North Road in 1975, marking the beginning of their long-standing relationship with the town. Wayne St. Hilaire was a pillar of our town, contributing in numerous capacities over the years. His dedication to public service is evident through his roles as a select board member from 2001 to 2007, Municipal Budget Committee member from 1995 to 2005, the chair in 1999, and select board representative in 2002, fire ward 1977, highway maintenance advisory committee member in 1997, assistant building inspector from 1982 to 1983, Municipal Buildings Advisory Committee member from 1999, and Zoning Board of Adjustment member from 2005 to 2008. Wayne also was a volunteer firefighter and EMT and plowed snow for the highway department for many years, ensuring our roads were safe during harsh winters. Kathy St. Hilaire has also played a vital role in Brentwood's development. She was a dedicated town employee, serving as the administrative assistant to both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Adjustment from 2000 to 2018, including many years as an alternate member to the Planning Board to ensure that the board always had a quorum to be able to do their business. During her tenure with the Planning Board, she created the entire financial reporting system when the board decided to take responsibility for the Planning Board's finances in the early 2000s. Before Kathy, the Board of Selectmen managed the Planning Board finances. Kathy also helmed the process to incorporate the revised tax map system developed by Patriot Properties into the record keeping for the Planning Board. This effort took many months and was done as she continued to handle all of her regular duties. Finally, Kathy was instrumental in making all Planning Board forms and application materials electronic as the town moved to internet-based public communication. All of this was done with her genuinely warm and thoughtful approach to dealing with others that she always attributed to her customer service responsibilities with the family business. Kathy also served Brentwood as a volunteer. She was a member of the Recreation Commission from 1992 to 2013, and in typical St. Hilaire fashion, stepped to the plate to chair the commission for many years. Kathy's volunteerism also extended to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, where she served as an alternate from 2019 to 2023. Her contributions to the town's planning and recreation activities have left an indelible mark on our community, not just through her tireless work ethic, but because at every turn, her good humor and warm regard for her neighbors in Brentwood guided her efforts.
She told you I was on.
Wow. Their passion for community sports was unmatched. When the eldest daughter aged out of the farm league and had no place left to play, Wayne and Kathy took it upon themselves to start the town's softball league. Wayne not only built the field that now bears his name, but he and Kathy coached all three teams when no other parents volunteered. Their dedication ensured that girls in Brentwood had the opportunity to play sports, fostering a sense of teamwork and community spirit. After every game, win or lose, Wayne and Kathy treated the players to Jimmy Lee's or Ice Cream Haven, creating cherished memories for all involved. Their company, Appliance Services, continued to sponsor Brentwood teams long after their daughters and grandchildren had aged out, demonstrating their lasting commitment to the town's youth. In addition to their individual contributions, Wayne and Kathy were honored with the Brentwood Champions of Child Award in 2009, a testament to their dedication to the well-being and development of the town's youth. Their company, Appliance Services Incorporated, has been a staple in the community, providing appliance repair and HVAC services for over 44 years. The company has supported local sports teams and community events, demonstrating Wayne and Kathy's commitment to the town's well-being. Without the St. Hilaire's dedication, the Brentwood Recreation Complex, as it exists today, would not have been possible. Their legacy of service, community spirit, and unwavering support for Brentwood's youth will continue to inspire future generations. We extend our deepest gratitude to Wayne and Kathy St. Hilaire for their remarkable contributions to our town. Their legacy will forever be a cornerstone of Brentwood's history.
Thank you. Do you guys want to say anything? I don't want to put you on the spot. If you want to, I'll bring the microphone over to you. That's okay. You have an opportunity to have the mic.
Thank you will never be enough for this. We've enjoyed all those years together, working for the town, working with the town. It's a great community. A lot of faces we don't recognize anymore, but we're old now. So, but it's been great. It really has been great. Thank you very much. This is quite an honor.
I want to thank everybody here for the respect and dedication, and we enjoyed every minute of it. We had good trainers way before we got started. Our lady up front here, her grandfather is the one that I replaced as selectman, Cross. There were very many good examples of community sportsmanship, leadership for us. So we just carried on the tradition, loved every minute.
Thank you. Wonderful. Now, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but don't feel like you have to. It's totally up to you. All right. As the folks in the crowd can see, we did give the St. Hilaire's copy of our town report. I think folks probably know that this is now available on the website. So if you just go to our Brentwood website and go in the search bar and put annual report, you will find it. You can pick up hard copies at the town clerk's office, or they will be at town meeting. So if you feel that you need a hard copy, you are welcome to get one, but it is on the web in the exact same form, just the dedication was hidden until tonight. So presumably that will be updated as well. So anybody who wants to get a town report, please feel free. All right. As it looks like we have the public hearing on our agenda before public comment, which is fine. So tonight we do have a statutorily required public hearing. This is the same process that occurred last year when we had the SB2 warrant on our town warrant. And so because we have a tax cap warrant on our warrant for town meeting this year, we are required by law to have a public hearing. Anyone who's interested in speaking about that warrant is welcome to come forward and give any comments that they would like. This is on Article 11, adoption of local tax cap. I will just read the warrant into the record. Article 11, adoption of local tax cap. This is submitted by petition. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 32.5B and implement a tax cap whereby the governing body or budget committee shall not submit a recommended budget that increases the amount to be raised by local taxes this year's base that is higher than the prior year's actual amount of local taxes raised, last year's base, adjusted for inflation using the inflation index CPIU for the Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Mass, New Hampshire area, published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and the change in population in accordance with RSA 32.5B1B. I'm not sure that our other microphone is working, so I'm going to bring this microphone up. We may have to share microphones a little bit, but anyone who would like to is welcome to speak to this warrant. Yep. Who's interested may come up to the mic.
Liz Faria, South Road. So I don't know who the petitioner is, so I guess I'll ask this to the select board. What is the difference between the consumer price index -U and the consumer price index -W? Because I understand the W is like the Social Security COLA.
I think you'll have to ask the petitioner. Jim, you showed this here. He's the petitioner.
Liz, you asked who submitted this petition. It was myself, along with, I think Daphne can say that there was 4 pages of signatures from our residents. We have a pretty good team put together. I'm gonna let Jim Hilaire handle the finances on this. He's done our homework for this. for the residents to give you a clear outlook on how things look. So Jim, if you want to take this, go right ahead.
And just to answer, you want to know the difference
Between CPIU and CPIW, I'd go to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and it'll tell you the difference, but the state specifically says CPI-U is what you're supposed to do.
Okay, so this is my problem. The COLA is 2.5 and the other one is 3. So, and obviously this, if it passed this year,
Oh my gosh.
I'm loud, I can say that.
Yeah, I know.
Now kind of, now it's working. I don't know what's going on. I think they can't be on at the same time.
Right, we're just gonna use this one. All right, go for it, Liz. Yes.
Okay, well, what my problem is that this is very hard to understand. And I know that the cost of living increase, which I believe is the W and not the U, but I'm not entirely sure, is 2.5. So the COLA for the retired and the people that get Social Security is 2.5. And our taxes are projected to go up if everything passes. At the warrant, our taxes are projected to go up 8.4. So there's a big difference between 2.5 and 8.4. And I realize that if this goes into effect, which it'll be a stretch because it's so hard to understand, but if this goes into effect, it won't be for this year anyway, it'll be for the following year. And since it doesn't have an amount, because it can't have an amount, because there's gonna be a different amount next year, I am just suggesting that those of us are concerned about our taxes for upcoming, which is also gonna be a reevaluation, that they may wanna make a change at the town meeting on March 15th, which is neither 8.4 or 3. Might be 5 or whatever, but I think at the town meeting is the way to change the tax coming up this coming year.
Other commenters? I know Jim's getting something set up, but does anybody want to comment while he gets set up?
Hi, Rob Wolfcheck, PVD Drive. So for whoever has the information, it always seems odd to me that the town only looks at expenses and doesn't include any revenues. How would it work if the revenues in town went up a lot, if we're fixing the expenses by a certain percent? And how would grants where we get an income, does that flow through as an expense on one side but grants on the other? So I just want to make sure that we're not doing anything that precludes us from getting grants or other sorts of revenue. Thank you.
If you want to, yeah, just make sure you use the microphone.
My name is Jim Azure, and basically got involved with this when I signed the petition, and I looked into the RSA and what it said. Met with the town administrator and the clerk, trying to understand what this would mean, because I'm trying to understand whether I want to support this or not. And then spent 90 minutes with New Hampshire Department of Revenue reviewing the statute as well as our warrant, and then about an hour with NHMA attorneys and got legal guidance for the town on what this means. So I did my best to try to summarize this. Maybe it'll answer some of these questions for all of us. And I also have some examples of what it would have meant if we had this in place in previous years. So, let's start this. The chair already read the petition. I'm not going to read it again, but there's one important thing that I want to point out. In the end, it talks about it has to be in accordance with RSA 325B 1B. So we're going to remember that 1B because it makes a big difference in how it.
How does the words in the statute?
Can you use the microphone? We're going to have to share.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm having a problem with how the words in 1B are in accord with, how that's drafted. So I don't know if you could explain that.
What the attorney at NHMA said is that when you do a proposed tax cap, you must choose either 1A or 1B. 1A is a fixed cap, meaning you come up with a fixed amount. You can grow the budget $100,000 a year, or 2.5% of the previous base. That's 1A. If you want to use the method that looks at economic conditions, CPIU and population growth, that's 1B. And it's an exclusive or. It's an both the.
I understand how the statute works. The question was, how is the wording of the petition in accord with what's stated in 1B? Because I don't see them jiving.
The warrant language came right from, I believe, section C, and you have to determine.
Liz sometimes and I will agree, but on this one, I'm agreeing with, what Liz had just indicated.
I don't know, I'm not disagreeing, I don't think there's a disagreement here. I just think that what the attorneys have told me is that you must choose either 1A or 1B, and that the provisions for a fixed cap, 1A, are different than one that uses variable based on economic conditions. That's 1B, so that.
My apologies.
No, don't apologize, I mean, look, I'm doing my best, so. So if you look at what is being proposed, the estimated amount of local taxes to be raised, that is not appropriation. I think the question, it's after revenues are taken out, and if you have offsets, it's what actually gets put in when they generate the tax rate in, I believe, October. So that's the that acts as the base. So the cap acts on that base. And it just says that the amount of local taxes to be raised in the current fiscal year cannot exceed the previous base multiplied by this formula. And again, some people get concerned about formulas, but it's not that complicated. It's based on the CPIU index for this region, which is basically like an economic conditions. I think it's more broad than just than COLA. It looks at a lot of different things. And then it takes into effect population. So if you had population growth of 1%, it would get increased by 1% over that. So again, this kind of is the language from the state RSA in compliance with how this warrant was written. Okay. This is just kind of my summary based on our warrant, how the warrant is written, and my conversations with the legal people at NHMA and the financial people at DRA. So the formula is based on federal economic data for the New Hampshire region and our own Brentwood local town population growth. The formula, as it was listed on the previous page, you take previous year's base and you multiply it by 1 plus the CPI, and then there's a ratio of this year's population to last year's population. The base is the previous year's taxes to be raised. The CPIU is based on the Boston, Cambridge, New Hampshire, Mass-New Hampshire. That is the closest regional CPIU index that the federal government comes up with. The population figures, and this is right from the RSA, are calculated by the state. Basically, they give us the numbers of what the population is in Brentwood. Very important. This warrant only applies to the town and municipal tax. It does not, to be raised, it does not impact the local school, the Swayze school, or the co-op schools. It has nothing to do with schools. The legislative body can override the tax cap by the usual procedures at the annual town meeting. And that's again per this RSA 32.5B, paragraph 3. So if there was some urgent reason to go above the tax cap in one given year, there can be a warrant at town meeting that says we need to go above the tax cap by this much because whatever. And then people would vote on that, whether we allow it or not. So the cap doesn't prevent the legislative body from making appropriations that go above the cap. It would just have to be done as a warrant. And again, the yearly,
Do you know what the votes required to override a cap?
I don't know that.
I think it's simple majority.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Do you have to do it for each warrant article that goes above the cap? Or can you do it?
No, I believe what he explained to me is that you just have to go a warrant that would say, we want to go X number above the tax cap for this year. And it would have to be passed by the legislative body. And then the yearly town appropriation increase would be limited to, revenue growth. And revenue meaning non-tax revenues. So in our town, it's basically mostly all auto registration, but there's other things. So as that goes up, plus what this cap would every year, the cap allows growth. Okay, and I think the next slide is where I actually. Okay, so and I know this is an eye test, but we'll put this up on the web. I think I can get this to the select board and we can get this up on the web because it might be hard to see some of these numbers, but basically I have from 2020 to 2025 really isn't good because we don't really have a good number yet. We're still working on it. We haven't had a town meeting. But from 2020 to 2024, this kind of shows if we had this tax cap in place, what would have happened. So it looks at last year's base, which was previous years, and then here's the CPI number for each of those years. So in 2020 it was 2.2%, 21 it was 0.5%, 2022 was 6.3, 2023 it was 6.4, 2024 it was 2.0, and this year it's 3.9. So then here's our population. So with the formula, you basically take the CPI growth plus any growth from the previous year in population. This column shows what is the tax cap percent. You can see a lot of years, because the population is staying about the same, the CPI number is the tax cap number. But in 2023, there was a population increase, so the tax cap went from 6.4 to 6.5. And the next column just shows, based on that cap, what is it in terms of dollars. So you can see how much this cap is in actual dollars for that year and the new tax cap value. And you can see every year it should go up, but it doesn't always necessarily go up because, well, I'll get to that, but here's the tax cap impact, here's the tax rate for those years, and if we had a cap, how it would have affected us. So you can see in 2020, 21, and 23, there would have been no effect because our amount taxed was less than the cap. So there would have been no effect. There would have been no effect. But in 2022, we were almost $249,000 higher than the cap for that year. So if the cap was in place, the amount to be taxed would have had to been reduced by $249,000, or roughly 34 cents on the town tax rate, or a $400,000 home, that would have been a reduction of $135. In 2024, you see a big number, that the tax cap impact is over $1 million. You say, well, what happened? Like, how we got a big appropriation increase, or what happened? Well, actually, this is because there's something called fund balance offset to taxes. So the town can take money that is in the fund reserve, excess money from previous years, whether it be, usually it's what we expend versus what we had appropriated, so there's leftover money. And they, for 1 year, can apply an offset to the amount taxed on the town. In 2023, we had an anomaly, I would say anomaly. We put $1.7 million of offset, a fund balance, toward taxes that year. Well, we were all really happy because our taxes went down in 20. It didn't go up that much in 2023, but unfortunately the next year, that money is in there. It's in the expenses of the town. And the next year, we didn't have $1.7 million. We only went back to, I think it was about $870,000. So, but this formula And I'm not sure, I was kind of talking to the chair about this earlier, I'm not sure if it was the legislature's intent or not, but what this does is it penalizes a municipality for using large amounts of fund balance as a one-time offset to taxes to try to reduce a tax rate. And again, I'm not gonna I would love to have a discussion someday with people on fund balance. I did a little bit of this to the select board and the budget committee this past year. But if you look at best practices in New Hampshire and from the GFOA, which is a national organization, there's definitely recommendations on how much fund balance you should have and the proper techniques of using fund balance. And using it for one-time tax offsets, while it might sound great for that 1 year, it really isn't something you want to do, because the next year, and what happened to us in 2024, we got whacked with the increase from 2023 to 24, plus that we didn't have that $1.7 million, so we got whacked with the increase from 23. That's why our taxes went up 7% this year instead of the 3% that they were supposed to. But anyways, a little sidetracked. It's just that unfortunately, because we, Brentwood, have kind of not followed best practices, in my opinion, in using fund balance, this formula for that year really shows like out of whack. And it would have, I mean, because they lowered the actual taxes levied to $2.8 million because of that $1.7 million one-time decrease. Well, the next year's amount you can tax is based on that base times your factor. So you really got whacked. We would have been $1 million off that year. Anyways, so there's a lot of numbers here, but basically it's the cap sets a limit to the town tax commitment each year based on current economic data and population. The cap would have limited the town tax commitment in 2022 and 24, I've kind of explained that. And then this last one, the impact of using large fund balances to offset taxes will be significantly felt in the following year. And again, in my opinion, if you look at the best practices, we should not be doing that. And there's already been some discussion about this. I mean, I believe if you look at other municipalities, you will see they don't do that. And anyways, I think that's kind of all I have.
Jim, can I make a comment?
Yeah, this was just the adoption part that talked about the 3/5, but sure.
So I'm not going to try to get into any technicalities of this, but if anybody's feeling confused, this law just changed last October and was signed by Sununu. So if any of you know friends that live in communities that have a tax cap, it was not this complicated. So just to help people understand, because this really helps me understand what it used to be and what it is now. What the tax cap used to be was, let's say Brentwood's tax cap is 4%. So the legislative body voted on that, we have a 4% cap. And the way you would calculate that is you would take the taxes that you raised last year, you would add back any money that we gave you to discount your taxes, because that was in the budget. We just ended up having extra because like we had 2 unfilled firefighter positions, or we got a huge grant for something and didn't need to spend it, or we had a tax deed or something like that. So our prior town administrator had told us that it was Brentwood's tradition that every single year we used money to pay down your tax rate to keep your taxes as low as possible. So the way this law used to work, you took what you actually raised last year, you added back the fund balance, and you multiplied it by 1.104%, and that was your budget. This just puts a whole equation in instead. And so when Sununu signed this into law last fall, it now sort of bifurcates, like Jim said. You now have to pick, do you want to take the money that you raised last year and adjust it by this calculation? Or do you want to add back in the fund balance? You can't do both. Like Jim said, we don't know why that's what they decided. So if this seems confusing, that's the difference. This is a law that no town has a tax cap like this, because this law literally just passed a few months ago. So if you're confused, that's probably part of the reason. This is new, and I think the legislature had some clear intentions, and I think what Paul and I, who's a lawyer, were talking about is this is confusing. And we'll see if the town votes for this or not, but just so people understand, if it feels new and strange and maybe different what you've heard of from before, it's because it is completely new, and it was just signed into law a few months ago.
So, with regard to the statute, and I'm not saying that the townspeople shouldn't have an opportunity to address a tax cap if that's what they wish to do. But this I find very confusing, and the statute specifically permits there to be a percentage or a specific amount, rather than tying this to some federal statistic that really, in my mind, has no particular relevance to the town. So if the townspeople want to pick a number that they think is reasonable for a tax cap, well, that I would understand. And then in terms of what Rob Wolfchuk was mentioning earlier, in terms of the revenues, well, that ends up resulting in the fund balance. And that fund balance ends up being the adjustment. So in that way, that to me is much more local and unique to the town than tying this to some, in my opinion, complicated formula. And I'm not saying that the town shouldn't have the ability to address a cap, but this is just not making sense to me. And again, Liz had mentioned earlier, you know, this is something that could be also addressed at town meeting in terms of some sort of amendment, so.
That absolutely, what you're saying is absolutely true. The one thing is, if you go with a fixed cap, folks, meaning we pick a number, the town can't increase appropriations more than $150,000, okay? Or you say, and make it simple, oh, they can't grow more than 2.5%. The problem with that, in my opinion, and again, this is what I was just trying to present, like the facts of this warrant and what the state law says, but the reason why I really personally like and support, I think it's better to use the formula, is that who in this town is going to pick the number? Because I talk to people who are really unhappy about their taxes, and they're gonna go, I don't want it to grow at all. I want a 1%. And then I'm gonna have somebody else who's like, oh, I make $250,000, $300,000 a year. I don't care about the taxes, make it 25%. I don't know who picks a good cap. What this does is it forces us, like in our homes, we gotta go by what the economy is. I mean, if the economy is the COLA or whatever, if this thing is 5% that year, we do 5%. If it's 2%, you do 2%. I don't know, and the state kind of told me the same thing, that, yep, this is definitely new, and it will definitely force towns to do the right thing with fund balance offset, and oh, by the way, it takes out that piece of who picks the number, because that has definitely been a problem in some communities, and some have started off, I believe it was Litchfield, had like a value, $150,000 or something, and then they had to vote to change it to 2.5% or something. They've been going back to changing it. Where this, again, it's not really up to us. It goes by whatever the economic conditions are. That kind of drives it. So I think with that, I think I'd be done unless someone had a specific question later I could just answer.
I guess I'm confused what the confusion is about the intent. Because the intent is exactly what it says, pretty much that a lot of townspeople are tired of high taxes. And this movement, this article, this whatever you want to call it, warrant article, is an attempt to slow down the town so that we have sustainable, reasonable taxes and not getting whacked every year. And I know this year, what's the tax going to be going up this year? 8.4, but in reality, if you go by your actual expenditures from last year, our tax increase is going to be between 17 and 20% this year. It absolutely is. And I don't know where the mess up in the numbers are or the math, but we can't afford that. And if it was reasonable, it would be so much more palatable, and that's all we're asking for, to please be reasonable. We cannot afford to have our taxes going up $800, $1,000 every year.
Ward, that's great. I understand what you're saying, but, you know, as drafted, that presents problems, and that's all I was suggesting, is that there's simpler ways to do this, which are permitted by the statute. So I think the townspeople ought to have an opportunity to have it addressed, but have it addressed in a more simple fashion.
And I would support that if, and like, I don't know how to beg the Board of Selectmen to listen to some of the people. Like, the tax rate right now and the taxes are harming residents. There are a lot of people in here that are on fixed incomes that have reached out to me that started this. Like, they've been here their whole lives. Like, they can't do it. So what are we to do? Came up with this. This is legal. It's a legal document. We're trying to get your attention that this needs to stop.
I totally hear you, and I hear that what your intention is to have a tax cap that basically is right around inflation. What I'm concerned about is the way the legislation is written. Last year, we gave back $800,000 from the general fund, which made every single person in this room, your taxes went down significantly. Under this cap, we won't be able to do that, and taxes will go up significantly next year because of this. It will go up once, and then it will just depend how we decide to manage the unspent fund balance. So I just want people to understand, yes, what you are suggesting is a cap that matches inflation, and you have every right to request that. But I just want people to realize that because it's a 1A or 1B, 2 years ago we gave back 1.6 million, last year we gave back 880,000, something like that. That money is going to basically disappear out of the budget. And if you look at Jim's numbers, he said we would have had to cut this year's budget by $1.1 million. Our budget's only going up by 687. So we would have actually had to cut this year's budget by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if that's your intent, then that is absolutely fine. I just want to make sure people understand that there's this funny wrinkle about the fund balance, and people need to know what they're voting for. But I understand what you're saying. You would like a tax cap that matches inflation, and that is a perfectly reasonable request for you to make.
Raise your hand if your taxes went down this year.
I didn't say your taxes went down, I said they went down from what they would have
Yes,
been.
That wasn't the town, did it?
If we had not given that almost $900,000 back, your taxes would have been significantly higher. Every time we use fund balance, it's called paying down the tax rate. Every year in Brentwood, like at least 13 years, as long as our old town administrator had been here, extra fund balance had always been used to pay down the tax rate. This would make that much more challenging, and it would be an incentive for the select board not to pay down the tax rate at all, because it would harm the next year's budget. And so you don't feel it as a tax cut because you never see the higher number, because when we set the tax rate, we've already figured that discount into it.
Which I think is the total purpose of this, is to stop using the fund balance to offset the taxes to people. That's the purpose of it. So that we spend less money and tighten the belt a little bit up in town. I think that's the purpose of it. That's my understanding of it. And if you want an amendment, I don't think this is unreasonable. And if you want to negotiate and talk about something and go into town meeting and come in there with a percentage that's palatable for everybody, that certainly people are willing to work with you. But if it needs to be done on the side, in a meeting, whatever, I don't think it's unreasonable. But this is, it's preventing that fund balance from being misused. We're down, what's the state recommend for a fund balance?
5 to 17%, and Brentwood usually does 5.
And we're at 4.
We're a little bit below 5 this year.
We're below 5.
Yeah.
That's just slightly below, because we felt it was better to give money back to the people.
We thought it was safe.
Which in turn, this year is gonna hurt us. When you pay the fund balance, I believe it does, it's more damaging when you're using that fund balance.
Why?
Lower the taxes?
We're lowering the taxes, and we did.
Because you're spending more than you're spending more. It's a smoke and mirror. In light of what I was saying, it's 7.8% increase this year up front. With that fund balance and everything, it's actually about a 17 to 20% increase this year. Well, maybe if you showed up to a meeting once in a while, I would respect you a little bit.
Ward, please sit down. I think you're done. That's okay. John Ward's done.
speak up, John? We can't hear
how
you.
these things are actually functioning.
Yeah, John's just saying that's not how the math works, which is correct. So the fund balance does not raise your tax, it does not raise your budget. There is a set budget. We have to raise that amount of money in the fall. If we have extra money from last year, we have to raise less from you. You get less dollars taken out of your wallet. That's how the math works.
So just for estimation purposes, so that people can understand, I think, what Jen is trying to say, if we do not use the fund balance, any fund balance this year to offset the total town appropriation, the town portion of your tax rate is gonna go up by 40%. Because we usually use the fund balance to reduce it.
That's as a result of revenues that have come in, correct?
It's sometimes unspent appropriations. Like, for example, we have 2 fire positions that are open. So we have to appropriate for that, assuming we're gonna hire, and then sometimes we don't. And we have like a deeded property that we're gonna be getting money from. Sometimes the town gets extra money, and one of the benefits of having that extra money is paying down your tax rate.
And Ward, just to be clear, I mean, this has always been in that range of 5%, which, you know, leaves always a fairly significant cushion and reserve for the town. So in my mind, that has always been a good thing to get to that level. So we may not, be disagreeing. I just think that there's a simpler way of doing this than what's in the wording of this. And, I think it can be done with just a simple number or a simple percentage. Yeah, and it addresses the fund balance issue, and it makes it so that it's unique to the town and what our economics are in the town. Looking at that fund balance and what the revenues that have come in versus some sort of voodoo federal blah, blah, blah. That's my opinion. But I don't think, in terms of conceptually, we're talking about something all that different.
That would be great, thank you.
Thanks, Matt Lipinski, Middle Road. Liz mentioned this earlier, and I just want to confirm that if this was adopted and passed, it would have nothing to do with this year's tax number. It would be effective the following year.
Budgeting this fall.
Right. And so any issues with this year's tax number would be addressed via an amendment at town meeting, totally separate and apart from this. Second question I had, Jim, can you go back to your numbers slide? Thank you. Just for 2024, and even though this would not affect 2025, I couldn't read it from back there. The difference between taxes, what taxes actually were and what they would be under the cap, just the total number. 2024, I don't need the formula, just one.
I'm not giving you a formula.
Yeah, just one.
You're asking what was the tax amount?
Actual taxes that we paid in 2024.
The actual amount was, for 2024 was $3,977,367.
All right, and what would we have paid if this was in place?
The budget would have had to have been cut by $1,045,000.
So it would have been $1,045,000 less than that number. Correct.
And capped, yeah.
Correct. Okay. And what about the previous year?
Which is more than the budget went
Previous year, the
up.
cap
So
would
it
not
would've
have
been
impacted because tax commitment was $2,873,000.
Yes.
When the cap would allow 3.1.
Okay, and so that's because
But again.
the cap would not have applied.
What Ward's trying to
that
say
year.
is the reason why it was only $2.8 million of tax is because they took $1.7 million one time.
I understand that. I just, it's the difference. So the difference in the most recent equation was basically, what was the number you mentioned, Jen? $1 million.
Just over $1 million.
A little over $1 million. Okay, thank you very much.
Liz Faria, South Road again. So this is a little bit to do with Brett Ramsdale, who's also running for the budget committee. this is based on, I'm sorry, the planning board, sorry, I thought you were talking. He always asked what the actual was, so this says prior year's actual amount of local taxes raised. It doesn't say local taxes spent, right? So it's the previous made-up number. And how much did we have left over from that year?
So when you see the number, actual town tax commitment, that is our budget minus our revenues, minus whatever fund balance we decided to give back to you. So that's what, it's what's up there. So for example, that first column of, 2 to 3 million, and then this year it's up, that number is the amount that we go over with DRA in the fall to actually decide your December tax bill.
What did you have left over?
Last year we had, I want to say,
from 24.
600-ish thousand, mostly because of open positions, unspendings. Something around the realm of 600-ish thousand, I would say. I don't have it right in front of me.
Which is quite a bit lower than normal, right?
No, fairly typical. I mean, it varies just based on, during COVID, everything was wacky.
Well, I know.
That was partly why we had more money coming out of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, so leftover was about 600,000.
Correct.
Okay, so this is not based on actual spend, it's actual
It's, right, because the way you set your tax rate is based on the appropriations that the legislative body approved at town meeting.
Okay.
So that's how DRA uses the numbers.
So I will give the town administrator some time, but before the town meeting, I would like her to figure out what a 4% raise would be and a 5%, because I will be making a number. Thank you.
The only point I just want to make is, Paul, you've said a couple times that you have a problem with that number, that it's like a made-up number or whatever. It's actually tied to regional, not like just federal government, it's really tied to regional. And I think part of the reason that it's so important is because our town has a habit of misusing our reserve funds. Is that the right name? No, stop, not done, you can talk after. When you say that we're just a little bit below the minimum required, that's not just like a made-up number either, between 5 and 17%. I mean, that's how our bond rating is set. That is how, there's a lot of things tied to that number. It's not just it's not suggested like, hey, maybe you want to have this much. I mean, they're literally telling you, you should have between 5 and 17%, and we don't even have 5, and you guys are like, it's just a little below. No, we're like below the absolute minimum recommended. It's not good. And I believe that there is a way that you can use fund, I don't want to say the name wrong. What's the balance called? Fund offset? Yes, for one-time purchases, right? Which is what most towns do. In fact, I looked at Candy, because I have to look at these things because I live with him. And he explains it to me every day to see if I can understand. Believe me, I hate his budget more than you do. But Candia, right? I read how you guys did your warrants, and it was for a one-time thing. One-time purchase. Not done. Okay. It's a one-time purchase. So that means that when you use it, no money comes out of extra taxes, right? And instead of offsetting and lowering this rate for reoccurring funds, it's one time. So now, next year, when you go to set the tax rate, you already are starting with the taxes that we're paying for the operating funds, because it was already in this year's, because you only used it for one-time things. The way you guys are doing it is you're using it for reoccurring things, so that, yeah, it doesn't show up in this year's tax bill, but those reoccurring things are in next year's tax bill, and the year after that, and the year after that, which is why the state came up with this, because it is not best practices. Most towns do not do this. So when you keep saying you're giving it back to us, or you're helping us with the taxes, literally it's not helping us. It's helping us if we use it for one-time expenses. And that's not what we're doing. So what this does is force you to use it for one-time things, because the reoccurring funds, the reoccurring costs are taxed that year, and they will be in next year's bill, but we're already paying for them before you start increasing the taxes. So that's all I was going to point out.
So the easiest response is, can you use the unspent balance to just buy things? No, you cannot. You can use it in a warrant, correct.
That's how other towns do it.
You can use it in an emergency with the consent of DRA after a public hearing. But correct, you can pull unspent fund balance forward into a warrant. And I would point out, the unspent fund balance is your money. So this, I'd like to say in the past, $1 is $1. It's two different ways of thinking about running your town, and if the town would like us to switch over to this other form, what I'm just gonna tell you is, our town administrator advised us, our former town administrator advised us to do it this way. It had been done this way for at least the 13 years she had been here. I don't know if folks who have been here a long time can speak to that. If we want to change it, we certainly can. And when you say we misused or mismanaged the fund balance, I will explain to you. When we were coming out of COVID, we had a lot of extra money in that balance, partly because of some federal grants, partly because of unfilled positions and positions that we eliminated or froze during COVID. And this board discussed with our town administrator that people had had a really hard time. We were coming out of that like 11% inflation, and that she recommended that we go down to that 5%, which is the DRA recommendation minimum, which Brentwood generally does, and which we had done for 13 straight years, and recommended that we give that money back to give the taxpayers a break. And we did that, and municipal taxes went down 10% that year. Now, in retrospect, I think we made a mistake. I think we should have, but we didn't realize that at the time. We were like, that's great, let's give the taxpayers back some of their money. I get it, I get what you're saying. So what I'm saying, nothing that you said was really wrong, other than that, I don't believe we were mishandling your money. We were trying to give you back money in a time when taxes had been going up and COVID had been difficult. And we certainly can talk about changing the whole way Brentwood manages its fund balance if the public wants to do that. But what people need to realize is, at least in the short term, it is going to raise your taxes significantly, because we've been giving back somewhere in the realm of $800, $900, $1 million of your money back every year. If you'd prefer just to use that money to fund a warrant, it's the same dollars.
It's not the same dollars.
It is the same dollars. It's just from the year prior versus the year of. It is the same dollars. So I just want people to understand it's kind of two different philosophies, but when you say we mismanaged that money, we gave it back to all of you. So I just want to sort of defend us a little bit. If you think we mismanaged it by lowering your taxes, I guess, sorry, but we thought we were doing you a favor by lowering your taxes.
I'll give it to you next. I just, in terms of made up, if I said that, that was the wrong word. What I meant was that, would I rather use some sort of federal statistic in terms of how this gets adjusted, or would I rather use what's going on locally in terms of making the adjustment? And in terms of that, I'd rather be looking at what our fund balance is and what we're able to do locally as an adjustment, because to me, that's just a federal statistic. I'd rather see where the revenues come in locally, where we stand in terms of a fund balance, and that's what gets adjusted. To me, that's a lot more relevant. And I know I've heard bond payments a few times. I'm not aware of any evidence that our bond payment has been degraded. If someone has that, then please let me know. But you know, my understanding is that we've always been at that mark of 5%. We can quibble over if it's 4.8 versus 5. To me, you know, if you're at that level, you're at the 5% mark, which has given plenty of room for the town to operate. To me, that's a good thing.
So when I say mismanaged, I'm not saying it was intentional. I think you got bad advice. I'm telling you, I've looked at other cities, what they've done. If you look at what Concord's done, if you look at other small towns, they give it back in warrants. So the warrant says, for the purchase of this, not to come from, I don't have the exact words, obviously I'm not great at this, but to come from fund balance. And that way, you use it for the one-time thing, it doesn't affect your taxes for this year, that's where you're giving it back. And I'm telling you, if Jim came to me and said, honey, I wanna buy this boat, and it's gonna be $1 million loan, but don't worry, the first year's payments are coming out of our savings fund. I'm gonna have a problem with that, because yeah, that's great for the first year of payments, but then what happens for the next 19 years of our 20-year loan? And that's what's happening is a dollar is not a dollar. Now, if our pump goes on our well and we have a one-time big expense, I'm gonna say, yeah, honey, let's do that. Let's take it out of our savings plan that we've saved for a rainy day. It's a one-time fund. Next year, when our rainy fund is a little bit down, well, we're not still paying on it. That's the difference. So every year on operational funds, we are paying it forward and forward and forward. You've just given it back for 1 year. But if you're using it for one-time expenses, which is what other towns do, then that's a good thing, because now we're not hit for taxes at a higher rate. We're not trying to pay the boat loan for years 2 and 3 and 4 when the rainy fund, day fund isn't there. So that's all I was gonna say.
I guess I don't tell her that I bought the boat, right? Wow. Anyways, I just wanted to touch base. This fund balance thing and the percentage of being, it's not something that I came up with. It's not something that Town of Brentwood came up with. This is from the GFOA, which is a national organization. It's from the New Hampshire Department of Revenue, and it's from and from Moody's Investors. And they specifically, it's all based on we should have 2 months of operating expenses in our reserve. That's what they recommend. And again, I do believe that you were given bad advice. And I guess I wanted to ask, Candia, you have, the last number I had, almost 17%, 16% in fund balance. In 2023, 16.25% or something like that. I have the number right here. You had $2.27 million, 16.6%. I just think that what Laura was saying is true. Most towns don't take huge amounts of fund reserve and offset taxes because it's just gonna help us out for 1 year. It doesn't help us the next. And I just wanna finish with, if, what she's trying to say, if you do use the fund balance for warrants, for one-time expenditures, like you put in there a loader, or you put in retention bonuses for police, or you say firefighting jackets or something, right? And you say that it's gonna cost $150,000, but the amount is to be paid from the fund balance, not from an appropriation. The very first line at 32.5B1 specifically says that the amount of local taxes to be raised for the fiscal year shall include the operating budget and all other warrant articles with tax impact. And because you're doing it not as an appropriation, but from fund balance, there is no tax impact for those warrants. So, and again, I don't know what else to say other than the fund balance problem. I think it's true. It needs to be addressed in town, and I think we need to do it better. I think we need to follow the advice given by these people who know how to set best practices and not based on what our previous administrator was doing. Thanks.
So you're talking about something separate than your warrant article, which is fine. I just want to make it clear, Jim, that what you're asking for, we can do right now, and in fact, we are doing this year with one of our warrant articles. We just, I think that that was not something that we knew that people wanted.
Right.
So I think, Jim, if we want to have a philosophical change of how we manage our fund balance, we can absolutely discuss that. We have a new town administrator. DRA says 5 to 17 is fine. They approved us going below 5. They said that was fine. Their recommendation is 5 to 17. I think to Letty's point, these are two separate discussions.
Absolutely.
So if the people in this room would like us to use fund balance different, all right, send us emails, tell us. We'll work with our new town administrator to use fund balance different. It will raise your taxes at first, but in the end, you may like it better. But I just want to say, separate that a little bit in your mind from this. If you want us to change how we do fund balance, we're open to that. You don't need to do this tax cap to force us to do that differently. There are two different discussions. That's sort of a money management discussion, and we have new leadership now. If we want to change how we use fund balance, great, we can absolutely do that. But I really think you should think about this as more of the tax cap perspective, because they're really two separate issues. We can fix them independently of each other. So if you're gonna vote for this at town meeting, I hope that you're voting for it because you want a tax cap and not for all the fund balance stuff. We can fix that completely separate from this warrant. And I'm hearing that people want to do it differently, and we can absolutely do it differently than Brentwood has done it. That is not a problem, but don't get them conflated in your mind because they are really two separate topics.
I totally agree that they're totally separate items. It's just that this tax cap, the way it is written and the way the state law is written, you get two things. If you vote for this, you get, they can't grow the tax commitment, how much goes into the tax rate for the local town. They cannot grow above the CPI index and population. You get that. And because the way this is written, the way the state wrote this, if you don't use fund balance per best practices and throw a year with $1.7 million to help us out for that 1 year, the problem of the following year, who pays that $1.7 million? Because it's in the budget already. And yeah, you got a 1 year reprieve because of the fund balance offset. But with this, today, we, the taxpayer, have to pay the difference. And that's what happened in 2024 because they could only come up with $890,000 of offset. So there's difference between the 1.7 million and we paid it. If you vote for this, they have to live with it. If they tried to use $1.7 million of offset for that 1 year to help us out, guess what? The following year, they're gonna pay the price because they're gonna have to figure out how to run a budget with either like come up with more fund offset to figure out but they're gonna have to pay the price for that $1.7 million, not us. So I know they're two separate things, but they're very heavily linked because the way the state did the legislation, the fund offset does not get accounted for. If they use too much of it, they're gonna pay the penalty the next year, not us. Thank you.
It's not us, it's your budget, your service.
Well, no, it's, when I say you, it's the people who are, maybe me if I get elected, but I'd have to deal with it on the budget, coming up with a budget for the next year. What I'm saying is today, you guys can just do a budget, and we, the taxpayers, have to pick up the thing. It puts a pressure on you rather than on us, and you get both of that with this. You get the capping of the spending, you have something that's tied to the economy, and you have this fixing of the fund reserve. Thanks.
Yeah, hold on a second, I'm gonna get the microphone. Go ahead.
Sure, I appreciate this discussion and the openness on both sides about hearing each other out and the concerns. My biggest worry about this discussion is that we're really, and please just hear me out, we're really talking about paying for our police officers, our fire department, our road paving, and the people who we all interact with on a weekly, daily basis in our town. Okay, like that's the amount of money that goes into our local property taxes because of the municipal expenditures is one of the smaller portions. It's not insignificant, but it is one of the smaller portions of the amount of money that we all pay on our property taxes. And our property taxes are exorbitant, our property taxes are unsustainable, and our property taxes are unfair. I am in 100% agreement with every person in that room who feels that way. But I want us to really reflect. Just give me 10 seconds, please, of reflection on this fact. The state pays about $4,000 per student for an adequate education, which is a constitutional requirement in our state. And you and I pick up the tab on the rest of that. The state used to pay for retirement for employees. They have now downshifted that to us. We pay that 100%. The state continues to downshift and at the exact same time over the last decade have dramatically cut taxes for the biggest, wealthiest out-of-state corporations, and we have to pay the difference there. So we are on our property taxes seeing the impacts of those decisions being made in Concord. And unfortunately, that is having a disproportionate impact on us as local property taxpayers. So when we are having these discussions about making sure that we have leadership in our fire department for after our long time serving, so dedicated chief is potentially looking at retiring. Like, reflect on that, please. We're trying to make sure that this town is continuing to run effectively and smoothly, and we are trying to be as responsible as we possibly can. But there are decisions being made in Concord that are making things really difficult for all of us property taxpayers, not just in Brentwood, throughout the state. These types of things, these types of situations are happening, reverberating throughout the state. Thank you so much for giving me your ears for a few seconds, but please reflect on that. This is not just happening at the select board level. This is happening in Concord. It's just as much, if not way more.
Okay, thanks.
So Anthony Phillips, Lake Road. A couple things. A lot of discussion with regard to the returning money, et cetera. The money doesn't disappear, right? So we just do things differently, right? It's not like it's taxpayers aren't made whole. It doesn't go into a hole somewhere, right? So it comes back in a warrant article or something else. So I think there's a lot of discussion around that. If this passes, it's not going to materially change anything because the money doesn't disappear. So that's the first thing. Second thing, what John said, we're talking about municipal taxes. We're talking specifically about what we spend here. What the state's doing is a minor portion of our overall increase in spend for the municipal side.
No. From last year to this year, yes, but in the total number, the amount of taxes that you pay, like for the school.
Well, not
is
right,
way,
but we're
way
talking.
higher.
But this is for municipal
This is
spend,
just municipal.
which is
Like retirement.
it's a small.
Yeah.
Understood, but the changes that they're making this year don't account for very much of the
Yes, but a decade ago,
8.5%.
a decade ago.
Over time.
Yeah, we're talking about this year. For this year, the 8.5%, actually more like 10.5% when you include the warrant articles and the new rec person, et cetera, right?
What I was getting at was if they were paying retirement and if they were paying what an adequate education actually costs, so like we're paying between I think Liz Bria would probably know the number closer than I would, but it's roughly $16,000 to $20,000 per pupil. So we have to pick up that, just call it $15,000 extra dollars per pupil because the state is not pulling its own weight on that front, constitutionally required, or on retirement. Just those two things alone, property taxpayers. Just imagine those two things being paid for at the state level. Our local property taxes in regards to education and municipal would be reduced dramatically, like just sink, below what you would think would be possible. So that was my point.
I think the point is this has been over time. Can I just say one thing because I think it might be helpful? I wanted to actually get a sense of these numbers. So for a $400,000 house, just so everybody understands, if you have a $400,000 house in Brentwood last year, you paid just over $10,000 in taxes. 2,100 of that was municipal. So that's what we're talking about tonight. It's about 20% of your total taxes. And last year was the highest because we did not have as much fund balance to return. But over the past 5 years, the taxes that we're talking about for a $400,000 home has varied. 1,500, one year it was 1,700, this year it was 2,100. So just make sure people understand that that's the only number that something like this would change in your tax bill. To your point, the other things are not going up all that much, but it's sort of a progressive thing over time.
Yeah, so the only other last point I want to make on this is when I was on the budget committee, we actually talked about this before this law even existed. We talked about providing guidance to the select board, and it was specifically related to, the guidance that we were talking about was CPI plus growth, right? So that Three Ponds comes in and the trash that goes up, right? So you gotta cover that. I think this is a great idea. We never gave you guys guidance. I think the budget committee failed in that regard, frankly. Because we wouldn't be here today if that were the case, right? If the budget committee actually followed guidance like that, gave you guys guidance like that, you gave your town, the department heads guidance like that, then we wouldn't have, multiples of CPI increases in spend. So I am fully for this, even though it's unfortunate. Right? I did have one other question though. Does it have to go? Does it have to read exactly like that, or can you use like an average over 3 years?
It could be amended.
But I mean, so legally with this RSA, we can amend it to say, average over 3 years, so that you can actually,
My understanding is there is a state RSA that says that any language that comes out of a appropriation warrant is advisory, and that as long as the warrant as written by a petitioner matches the intent and legality of the warrant, that it would probably stand. So this warrant, as suggested, could be amended in multiple different ways as long as it didn't change the intent of the warrant, which is to impose a tax cap.
Okay.
Thank you. Jim Michaud, Brentwood, 329 Route 125. Jim, I just want to make sure I'm invited on the boat. Okay?
Yeah,
right.
She found out about it, now it's gone.
First of all, I'd like to address John Morgan's scare tactics. This has nothing to do with the schools. This has nothing to do with police and fire. This has to do with holding the select board accountable and making sure that we, the taxpayers, have a say in how you spend our money. And if I remember right, at candidates night, you actually said that the town didn't care about spending, that they wanted, you said that the town wanted to pay the taxes, that they were okay with paying these taxes. They're not. They're not. Thank you.
Sure. So the reason that I said that the town was okay with paying last year's taxes is because the town approved the budget. So we propose the budget, it goes out at town meeting. Last year it passed unamended. That is a factual statement. That means the legislative body approved our budget. If they had buyer's remorse afterwards, maybe some of them did. If some of you voted against the budget, you were overruled by the legislative body because that budget passed unamended last year. So when I said at candidates night that I felt that the public was behind us when we were growing police and fire, I said that because our budgets have been approved unamended 2 out of the last 3 years. You have approved warrants to increase fire, to increase police officers, and I took that as the legislative body speaking through their votes. Some of you didn't vote that way, that's democracy. But when I said that, that's what I meant. Our budget passed last year. We may make the budget, but every single voter who shows up at town meeting is the one that authorizes that budget, and our budget went through unamended. And if some of you didn't agree with it, that is 100% your prerogative, but the voters spoke, as they will again on March 15th, and that is what I meant. I did not mean the voters did not care. I meant the voters who cared, who came and put their butt in a seat at town meeting, voted and approved the budget that Buncombe and Select Board put forward. We don't operate in a vacuum. We propose a budget. You guys adopt it.
Liz Faria again, South Road. You also just said, and I just want to make sure that everybody heard this, that this is advisory. So even, correct, you said this is advisory. The warrant article is advisory.
No, this would be binding. The wording is advisory in the statute. You can change the wording a little bit if you want.
Change the numbers, it doesn't have to be.
I don't remember we could change warrant articles like that before. Okay, but the select board can also decide not to do it, like they did with the newsletter, no?
That is not true.
Okay.
This is like SB 2. If this passes, we're doing it. Like,
So
it's
some
discretion.
yes means yes is yes means yes,
For an
and all no
appropriation.
means no is no means
This is not
no.
an appropriation. This is the way you run your town. So this would be binding.
So if we amended as opposed to doing this, or if we did this also for the following year, because remember, people, we have a tax reevaluation, our assessments, our houses are gonna, if you think your house is worth the same as it was in 2020, you got another thing coming. So that's happening this year on top of the municipal 8.4% that they're proposing if everything passes at town meeting. This has nothing to do with this year. It's not a bad idea, so for the future it might be a good idea. But this has nothing to do with the problems we're having this year, and we will continue to have because of the reevaluation. So it's gonna be so much bigger in the fall, the increase in taxes, it's gonna be just horrendous, I think. So if we amend, as I was suggesting, at town meeting, a different amount, say 4%, do you have to do that, or can you decide not to do that?
No, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Can I speak for a second? I just, can I say something about revaluation, because this is a very